Hey everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Snapchat. Today, I'm joined by none other than Cozy Snap. Cozy, who's your favorite character from Dragon Ball Z?
Oh, the shirt, man. You know, I'm a simple man, so Goku I just love, but Vegeta's the top tier. I feel like saying Goku is like what's your favorite video game, and just Mario or Pikachu for Pokemon, you know. But yeah, Vegeta. But I could go deep. I could definitely cut some more deep characters, but I'll say that Brawly I like a lot, but yeah, I would say Vegeta.
Yeah, I love Vegeta too. Vegeta has like the greatest story arc overall, I think, right? But I've always been like a huge fan of like the Videl and Gohan's kind of relationship and what happened there, and like maybe because like when I was a kid, I was like, man, I could be Videl. Like, why can't I be taught this, right? So in my head, I still remember from like the tournament when she's fighting and she like catches herself, she flies for that first time, and it was so cool. Like that whole, I mean, the Cell games, is that not one of the absolute best like overall arcs in anime? Not that I know anything about anime, honestly, but
it's really good. Yeah, not in anime, but in Dragon Ball Z, the Cell games held up better when I was a kid. I rewatched it not too long ago, and I still like. I love the Frieza saga, you know. But yeah, man, and Trunks is up there for me as well. Like, Sword Trunks, love it. But I suppose we're not playing Dragon Ball Snap. We are playing Marvel Snap. And what are we talking about on today's episode, bud?
Oh, here we're going to be talking about a meta snapshot. We're going to be talking about some of the best decks that you can play in Marvel Snap right now. We're also going to be talking about the best designed cards in Marvel Snap, the ones that we think have like a really something special to them, right? Whether they connect with the character from the lore or they're just damn fun to play. And we're also talking about the cards that need buffs, Cozy, because there are cards that need buffs in Marvel Snap. Hopefully we're getting a patch and some updates coming up soon this week. And Cozy, what did we discuss on your channel?
Yeah, so we talked about conquests and like our strategies, some cards for fillers, decks. It was a really good conversation there. We talked about pool 3 through 5 tier list, but by the data. Super interesting. I disagree with a lot of it, but that's why it's by the data and not opinionated. And then Marvel Snap versus DC Dual Force, and the game that just kind of launched in the beta, and the similarities and the differences between them, and our overall thoughts.
Awesome. So let's get started with the meta snapshot. Now, Cozy, there are a ton of decks out there that are viable. The meta is actually in a really interesting space right now. Like, there's a lot of different decks that can win games. And so I'd like for you to hit us off with one. What's a deck that you feel that you can turn to reliably to get to infinite?
Yeah, so, I mean, we've talked about so many lately. The one that I have taken up so many ranks this season, and funny enough, man, it was so cool. It's cool to get a review like 1 week later. Like, how is it performing? Man, Move Wave. It held up. It definitely held up. Now, this is one with multiple man. This is more of a boosted move deck. But, dude, it's crazy. That move is relevant. Move is meta. One card made it that much more consistent. And I think I just have a decent understanding of the game and where the opponent's going to play. And with this, it allows me to turn back on my decisions that I made earlier, or when I see the locations out. It gives me a lot more guidance when to snap. And so personally, I have a lot of work to do to get to a spot where I'm going to play this on the Infinite Conquest. But man, it's extremely rewarding. We're seeing 60% plus on the win rates, man, which I, for one, am shocked. I don't know about you. I thought that we were going to see the win rates for Move be abysmal. But wow. And what else are you seeing? Wave as a perfect counter card, yeah?
One thing that's honestly completely shocking is not only the win rate, but the fact that, like, I think there's a huge misconception about the impact Ghost Spider's having on the meta right now. Like, a lot of people are like, Ghost Spider's not that good. It's not as flashy as Zabu or Silver Surfer or others, but, like, it is just doing work out there. Like, Ghost Spider has brought Move to a next level, and I don't feel like it's getting the respect it deserves.
Why it's not is because of what you just said, the flashiness. Like, it's the same as if with discard. If we even got another targeted discard that was like a 1 through 5 forecast, right? Would it stand out as like the sexiest thing ever? No, but what would it do for the discard archetype would be insane, right? And they're probably not going to do that for a while. That's what Ghost Spider did. It's not that Ghost Spider is so elite in herself, but she can target a move card more than just about any other one. With like Iron Fist is there, but you know, Doctor Strange can have weird things happen. The thing is, she's just bringing so much more consistency to these cards that needed their, power built up. You needed to be able to do combinations on turns 5 and turn 6, and she's only 2 costs. She is exactly what move needed. And it's funny because she went through so many iterations. She was a 3/3, She was like a 2. I mean, she's been. I've watched these data mines go all over, and so it's cool to see they landed on what I consider like the perfect card for move.
And bear in mind, this is happening in a meta right now that is being dominated by the deck that I'm going to talk about, Cozy, and that is High Evolutionary Control. Now, it feels like a bit of a cheat to bring up High Evolutionary because I think everyone realizes it's good. It's a massive chunk of the current meta, but at the same time, we have to discuss High Evolutionary. Now, on the screen, you've got the deck list here, and basically you're all running the classic High Evolutionary cards, the highest performers. You have Wasp, which honestly has been insane. You have Sunspot, Nebula, Storm, Cyclops. Of course, you have High Evolutionary themselves. But it's the thing, and specifically, it's Professor X and Spider-Man being worked together here in a deck without Daredevil, I meant to say. You also have Abomination, Doctor Doom, and Hulk rounding it out. Now, the thing I love about this deck, Cozy, is that it really does exactly what High Evolutionary wants to do. It has cards that can very straightforward win lanes. Like the Storm Cyclops lane is insane. Like tell me, like we talk about Storm Juggernaut, we talk about all these different Storm combinations in early beta, or even during like the early release phase. It was Storm, Jessica Jones. There's all these surprising combinations with Storm that I think get slept on. Storm Cyclops, because you're floating that extra mana on turn 4. He just goes boom, boom, boom with his face, and like you're winning that location. It's insane what this deck can do.
Cyclops is nasty. Nasty in a deck like this. I think why it's doing so good is it's pretty easy to operate, man. It's Storm, play Cyclops, and or Professor X. So Cheetah lane and drop Hulk. There it is. That's it. Like that's what's winning a lot with this, and it's really hard to compete with that. It's really hard to compete. We don't have a lot of cards. Hell, Jeff is only, it's so many players, and they didn't drop him, and so it's tough to compete with a deck that's closing down. And it's built to have power because there's not a lot of those out there at the moment. High Evo is dangerously good, but it also is beatable. And there's plenty of ways to beat it, but you need to know how it operates, or I would say it's one of the more punishing decks, right? Because Shuri was easy to understand, double power, other card, big power. Whereas this, there's some moving pieces that you need to make sure that you play. You need to try to contest that lock lane with one or two big cards, and if you don't have those, get out of there. It can be it's a good deck, yeah, for sure.
All right, Cozy, hit me with a second choice for what you think is a really top tier deck in the current meta.
So Beast got a little bit of a nerf, some would say this last OTA, but it doesn't change that bounce decks are still in a really good place, Alex. Particularly one list now that he's a 3/4, he's a bit more wonky on some of the combos. But I'm telling you, man, Kitty Hitmonkey bounce decks are capable of putting out massive power, right? Like, take the Hulk, for example, we just talked about. You're able to match that power, and you're able to win that lane, and you're able to spread that power. Whether if you bounce back Kitty and she's, 8, 10 power, or if she's 1 cost and you have something like Gamora or other 5-cost cards to complement it. Dude, this deck in particular, though, that you see on the screen here, is extremely, it's hard to beat. It's very hard to beat, and it's primarily, I think, because of having the synergy of Kitty Pryde with Angela and Bishop, but you also have Mysterio that's going to synergize with Bishop and Angela and Hitmonkey. So you have like 2 extremely great cheap cost cards that share synergy with one another, and then of course you have American Chavez in most of those decks to kind of help thin the whole thing out. And so definitely, I would say that this is one that if you don't want to do move and you want a deck with a lot of variance and dependability, this is the one I would go for Conquest.
Bounce, without question, provides you with the versatility you need to win games. And I think, as you said, in Conquest, it's going to be huge. It's a top performer right now, but it does have some hard counters. Like, I'm of the person that, like, if I see someone snap on turn 5 and they're clearly, I've shown that I'm playing Bounce, I'm like, here comes a wave. Like, you know wave's coming, right? So just give them the cube, move on to the next game. But I think you're right to identify that in Conquest mode, specifically with the fact that you can be very versatile with how you play. You bounce around all over the place. Locations, who cares about locations? You're all over. I do think that Bounce is a super high performer. Its win rate is absolutely nuts. And yes, Kitty Pryde was given to almost the entire player populace. So it's a deck that has surprising synergy. And I love the fact that Bishop and Angela are back. And Mysterio, quietly, honestly, Cozy, what a performer Mysterio has been.
Yeah, I've been taking Bass out of the deck a little bit more too. I like having that the mystery on Mysterio. Where's the 4 power card at? I'll say the thing I don't love about the deck is what you alluded to as well. Outside of them just having wave is why like people don't love Deadpool. it's a turn by turn reminder of how much power you have on your side, right? Like, it takes a lot of the questioning out, and they know you have a 110 kitty, so they do the math, right? Or like with Deadpool, they know you have a 16 power card. It's not coming at a surprise. So that's where I think it does struggle. But if they do decide to be greedy, you've just got a lot of ways to push out that power. And yeah, Angela, man, Angela's such a location MVP as well. Like, she just helps with so many locations and the power and the decision to build her power up and protect her from Shang. So definitely a deck I enjoy, man. Do you have any other top kind of meta Snapshot decks?
Yeah, I got two more I want to talk about for sure. The first is going to be Sera Control. Now, Coccia, I know you're not going to be too upset with me bringing two control lists off the top here, but Sera Control, as you see on the screen here, with Kitty Pryde, you got the Nova Killmonger package, which for those that are new, I mean, honestly, you don't have to worry about taking your Kitty Pryde out with your own Killmonger. It's pretty safe from that standpoint, but it's cards that we've been talking about, right? It's those bounce cards. It's the Bishops, it's the Angela, it's the Hitmonkey. But in this particular list, we are running a Scarlet Witch, Sentinel, Lizard, Shang-Chi, Enchantress, and Sera. So this has answers to pretty much everything, and the Hitmonkey closer is absolutely huge. Much like bounce list, you are susceptible to a wave on turn 5, but I really do like this list because it's one of those decks, Cozy, when I'm on the ladder and I'm trying to push to infinite, I feel like I always have an answer. Like, there's no game that I'm just like, well, I can't do anything here. It's, even if there's a Wong, I got Enchantress. Like, there's always an answer with this deck. I think it's been a quietly very consistent performer for the last couple months. We've been living in a control meta, Cozy. Ever since Shuri kind of got knocked off its pedestal, we've been having this control meta like really floating around. And I like it because it does have some counterplay towards bounce, which obviously has higher highs. But I feel like Control has this very consistent hum that allows you to win games.
Yeah, decks where you can sneak in a Killmonger or sneak in a Cosmo is why I like Silver Surfer and Control. Just having that as a surprise card, both of those are so powerful. But if you play a Nova or Destroy deck, it's like, well, here we go. There it is. And it like gives those warning signs that you're going to play it. We're getting a big diversity when it comes to Sera Control list too. Like, we're now with Silk coming out, we could have even a different list come up. But do you play Sentinel? Do you play Scarlet Witch? Do you go with both Shang-Chi and Enchantress? Rogue just got buffed now. Really strong as well. And so that's good for it. The more that gets different kind of play styles, it then gives you options, and your opponent doesn't always think like, okay, he definitely has a Killmonger or Rogue, when in reality you don't, but they don't play their one cost because of that.
Another deck worth talking about today is an archetype that we've seen reemerge, and that is Discard. Now, what's ironic about the deck that you're seeing on the screen now is that it actually runs Swordmaster, which is not my preference towards how I want to play Discard, but the stats don't lie. This is actually one of the highest performing decks right now, hovering above 60% win rate. You've got your Nebula, which has been an absolute location winner in conjunction with Storm, which is in the list. You have Morbius, Wolverine, you have Swarm, Colleen Wing, Lady Sif, the two most reliable discard cards, Dracula, one of my favorite cards in Marvel Snap, and then the ultimate discard card in MODOK. You finish it off with the Apocalypse and Chavez, and you've got yourself a very well-rounded list. As I said, I tend to take out the Swordmaster in these types of lists, but the stats show that the Swordmaster does perform. Now, Cozy, my opinion is that Discard struggles a little bit against High Evolutionary, right? What's your opinion on Discard right now? Like, I was surprised to see a plus 60% win rate on Discard. What are your thoughts right now?
Discard actually, I think, is decent against High Evo because Dracula can go into the Cyclops flood lane, and it's like, okay, push your negative power all you want to. You're going to build that up. So you have ways to contest that. The only thing that is it's getting more popular, and so you're able to kind of nope out of there. The people that play Discard, you got to start snapping a bit earlier, because if you wait to play your MODOK and I watch two Swarms get cut up and then I watch your Apocalypse, it's like, I know what's about to happen. Like, I know the exact math, and I do both case scenarios, right? Is it Apocalypse? Is it Chavez? Maybe your Swarm has some variance. Now, Swarms, the greatest thing about Swarms and when you should snap with that deck is when the locations, like Mojo World's a hot location, like, oh my god, it's such a good deck because you can quickly fill out Mojo World. Your opponent had to spend all those turns on it, right? So it's losing that a bit. But I would say it's very consistent. I don't think I would play it in the infinite run, but I would play it in maybe the gold or silver conquest is how I look at it. Because of its predictability, your opponent can always kind of nope out until it favors them per se. But dude, it's still It hasn't gone anywhere. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Stature just got nerfed a bit. It's in this kind of like just, you know what it feels like? Is if things don't change, is like Patriot, reliable Patriot. Like reliable discard is probably what I'm going to start calling it. A good deck that does pretty damn well. When things go right for it, it does very well. And yes, it's definitely a top deck.
The thing I really like about this variation of discard, and not Hela specifically, is that realistically, you could play Colleen Wing anywhere. You could play Lady Sif anywhere. MODOK, you could very easily dodge a Cosmo, right? Unless obviously there's specific location considerations, but like, you can put MODOK wherever you want. It doesn't really matter for the most part. And so it's less susceptible to the, well, it's Invisible Woman. And then what happens on turn 5? Cosmo says hello, right? So I do think it does solve some of the tech problems that traditional discard Hela has. And ultimately, you're right. It's surprisingly reliable. Like, it's one that I generally climb with.
Yeah, and on top of that, too, you get they all have high power associated with them. And so you're going to win the priority game early, which typically is going to give you more benefit than not on locations, right? I can't tell you how many locations that you want to quickly try to get in there. If you get screwed by TVA or Gamma Lab, you have low-cost cards that you can throw out there. So it has a very nice and steady curve. And I would say the same, dude. I don't play Swordmaster or Hellcow in mine. That's a hard pass. I want to know exactly what I'm getting rid of. So yeah, definitely strong deck, man. And the only one we didn't mention today that I would add to this is the Jane Jaw. Is probably my overall winner right now. I think it's overall, at least probably around infinite play, is probably the best deck at the moment. I think it's disgusting. It is so much power. It's the best parts of all decks. You have Dracula to pressure. You have Thor to pressure. Dude, that deck just slaps.
I've been playing Jane Jaw on stream, and I've been climbing infinite with it, and I love it. And I got to tell you, it is surprisingly reliable. And it's because, I mean, it's so greedy, but with the high evolutionary Jane Jaw style deck, you're skipping turn. Who cares? Your Hulk's just getting bigger. They got nothing to worry about. And the thing I really love about it that I didn't appreciate till I really started playing, you can have Lockjaw on a location. If they're trying to contest that location, every single time you play Waspin, right? Boom, boom, the -2. And then you play the Jane, boom, boom, -2. It adds up, Cozy. That Wasp ends up being like legitimately like a big card in terms of tempo.
Yeah, Wasp is a liability in like any deck, but this deck, it's like you're begging for Wasp. And then Jane has now multi-purpose behind her as well. Like even, oh man, it's just crazy. Like the Jane boosting up Thor, like, yeah, they know you're going to get the 6 power. It doesn't matter. Like it's crazy the pressure cards that you have to play. And then you have an aggressive deck, one that can push the locations they're trying to win. And so all that's missing is a damn good Jane variant. That's all we don't have yet. But yeah, definitely one that if you haven't kicked the tires on, high Evo or not, you got to play it.
And for our next discussion, we're going to be talking about our favorite and the best design cards in Marvel Snap. Now, just to kind of preface this, we're talking about the cards that we think kind of fit the mold of the character the best, or the ones that are just the most fun to play. We're talking about the cards that we think really give Marvel Snap the identity it does. So, Cozy, I'm going to turn to you for your first card. What is a card that you just absolutely love in Marvel Snap?
I like that that this is a subject here. I just had a tweet about Spider-Man and kind of like because of how iconic he is, like, does it feel bad that he kind of sucks and doesn't have a unique role in the game? And it was a really fascinating discussion on Twitter. Like a lot of people had stuff to say about it, and it made me look back at other cards. Like before I say my best, like one set that I want to bring up is I've always thought this, and I don't know, now I'm playing Move, I think it more. I feel like Doctor Strange and Wong should have their abilities flipped. And like, because Wong is the master of portals, so that would make sense that he moves people. And then Doctor Strange has like all of his like what he can bring to the table per se. So like that is an example of one where I'm like, I like it, but I think they missed the mark just a little bit. The first one that comes to my mind that I think both balance wise and just as the card's flavor text goes, man, I think Mystique is perfect. Like talk about what she is in Marvel in general as an X-Men. But also, like, how that translates to the game. Now, they probably, when they made her, had her copy anything, you know, and that was probably, like, overpowered. So I'm glad that they limited it to ongoing. For an ability that's so strong, it's still relatively fine, right? It's not, like, over the top. People aren't beckoning in the streets for the nerf. So this is, like, my first one, like, off the rip. Love the design of Mystique and the feel of the card, because it's hard to nail this. where it's a good card and it's not over the top. I mean, look at Absorbing Man, right?
Mystique is a perfect selection. I mean, it really does capture the essence of what Mystique is in the comics, in the movies, right? If you go back to the early 2000s and you're watching Mystique, right, the effect the card does is very similar to what has been kind of made and portrayed. So I think that Mystique is an excellent call. And I'm actually going to stick with the X-Men style kind of era there. And I'm going to talk about a 6 cost that I think gets underappreciated for what it does, and that's Apocalypse. Now, I know this is going to take some people by surprise, but Apocalypse in the comics and in the lore is immortal. And this is amazing because, like, he's the card that when he gets discarded, he says he gets ripped up and says, nope, I'm coming back together, right? You can't get rid of Apocalypse. I mean, unless you Yondu, but let's not talk about that anyways. But so yeah, Apocalypse just keeps coming back, the immortal, and he gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And in in the X-Men series, the animated series, right? There's this scene where he gets absolutely gargantuan, right? He's fighting everyone, he's massive, right? He's really intimidating, but the immortality and the fact that he survives these discards over and over and gets stronger every time, I think is really fascinating.
There's a lot of like hidden cool things that they're having nods at the comics of, right? And I got to speak to Ben Brode recently, and one of the coolest things he said is, like, when he decided to make this game, he went all in. He got all the comics. He got everything that he could possibly learn about the characters to bring that to life. Like, even as something as, like, I'll pick a card. Arnim Zola is a good example. Arnim Zola, it's like, okay, he copies, like, okay. The Hydra, the whole thing about Hydra is you cut off one head, and 2 more shall rise kind of thing. So that's like what Arnim Zola is. He kills a card and then 2 other ones come out. So I love the design that they've done on these, and I'm sure there's even more kind of hidden ones behind them here. Obviously Hela and the Undead Army, there's things like that. But Apocalypse fits that flavor nice. And we have multiple characters that, like Wolverine, and they nailed that, but in a different cost. Deadpool is unkillable in a sense, but they did that as well. And so I love the design choices here. As far as like another one that I would say, and that's just feels very perfect for what the character is, or the design maybe, not even like their association in the comics. I gotta say, man, I think they did Thanos really well done. This is a card that's ambitious. This is an ambitious card, kind of like High Evo. How do you make something like this card and not make it over the top and too good? And you gave the stones identity that really capture what the stone is about in the MCU and in Marvel Comics. But at the same time, it's not over the top. It feels good to play. They all have their one-cost associations. There are punishments to it in a sense, because you make the deck a little bit too thick, right? And it makes your other draws less dependable. And it's Thanos. He needs to feel good. They buffed him. He's a 10 power. He can go to 20. He's he gets these massive buildups now. And that's important too, because he's the biggest of the big bads, at least that's how a lot of people feel about him. So this is what, if I wasn't playing Snap, I would see this card and be like, all right, I'm in love. This is killer.
The thing about Thanos that really gets me emotional is the effects they've added to the stones. On the original meta run-up of Thanos becoming popular, we didn't have the stone animations and all the small things that they added later. And I love, like, I'll hold the Space Stone out and just like that blue glow, I love it. The Soul Stone, I just hold it up on the board. I don't even play the card as fast as I'm supposed to, because I'm like admiring the glow of the stone, the sound, all those small things. And for me as a big bad, when you're spending, tokens on a card like this and you get something that's so well put together, it feels good. It feels great, Cozy, and like it does match the flavor of what Thanos is. And it does bring the stones to life. So I think that's a great call, Cozy. Similar to Thanos, a character that I think really shone in the MCU, and was one of my absolute favorite movies, The Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes. Okay. I think they captured the essence of Bucky Barnes just perfectly. Like, this is, I think, one of the best design cards in Marvel Snap. You have Bucky Barnes. You love him, but he's a little weak. He's a human. He's just a little guy. He dies. He's dead, right? Spoilers. And then Bucky comes back. He's got that metal arm. He's a 2/6. He's huge. He's unstoppable. And he is an absolute menace to deal with. I love how they captured this character. I think it's perfect.
Yeah, dude, first of all, great pick for like both good design and a great card. This and Move really made, you know what it is? If I look back at the beta, Winter Soldier and one other card made me fall in love with Snap, where I was like, I have to play this game more. Like, I want to master this archetype. And I'll get to Destroy more in a second. And funny enough, we're playing it now because of, the recency of it all. But it was Multiple Man. I remember playing Multiple Man, and this has got to be one of my favorite design cards in the game. I thought it was so crazy. And do you remember a time when you thought Multiple Man was like the best card in Snap? Like you were like, there's nothing that can beat this thing. Like I'm a monster with this. And then you quickly find out how fast move did fall out. But yeah, this and Bucky, just the flavor they brought to the game, I was like, this is such a unique game.
They did bring a unique flavor, and Multiple Man was also one of my favorite cards. Like just the way it bounced around and the way, like, and I didn't even know it was an X-Men. I did not even know that it had an appearance in the movies. Like I had watched the movies before, and then by surprise, I'm like, wait a minute, is that Multiple Man? It has to be Multiple Man, and it was, right? Like when he made like a fake crowd to help him get away and stuff. It was so cool, right? I think it is a pretty interesting card, and one that I think is well designed as well. And they capture it. They capture it. Another card that needs to get called out, Cozy. And this one is one that just recently climbed into the meta more often than not, is Super Scroll. If you think about what Super Scroll does, Super Scroll is able to take on the effect of anybody, and kind of similar to, Mystique is a shapeshifter. And I love the fact, especially with the card art, that you have yourself all the Fantastic Four present, right? I think it's really interesting, right? And it kind of is consistent across different card arts as well. But I think that Super Scroll is a really interesting card from the standpoint of it does capture the essence of what Scroll can do.
Yeah, it again, kind of like we talked about with Apocalypse and Wolverine, like this Absorbing Man and Mystique, they all kind of have similar things, but they did a good job diversifying it and what they bring to the table without making them feel too similar, which is why I don't love the Spider-Man thing, because it's such a perfect hero, and then it's like he kind of just now 100% feels like X. He used to feel like a 4-cost lane lockdown. Yeah, you played him on turn 5, but it was just different. It was a little bit different, and I think you brought this up on a Snapchat forever ago, how there's got to be a better thing you could do with him. Like he goes on his webs to the different locations, like twice, like a Nightcrawler with 2 moves or whatever. Like there's a lot of different ways. And Jeff kind of filled that role, but there's some really unique things you could do with that card. But yeah, I think Super Scroll is a good choice. I feel like there's some like not good cards that are still like really cool in the way they capture the character. Like, funny enough, man, I don't ever play this card at all. But Domino, man, like Domino is the hero of luck, right? Like luck is her superpower, and the perfect draw just makes so much sense for this. Like it's always on turn 2 and never before, never later. Like that's kind of the luck aspect. Now, maybe we could make her better. Maybe it's like a turn 4 card with more power. Like you take the most average stat line for a 4-cost card or what have you and make it, 7, and you always have a 4/7 play or whatever. Probably, I don't know. But I think that's a cool thing they could do. But this is a design I think is very fun as well. Do you have any more?
Yeah, in the 2-cost, I have another shout I want to make, and this is absolutely one of my favorites. For me, and I have a very complicated relationship with this card, Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch embraces the chaos that is Scarlet Witch. If you think about who Scarlet Witch is and how her character has developed over the course of movies and comics, that constant emotional struggle, that constant chaos that just envelops her entire life is kind of captured in the card where like it has an effect, but it's incredibly unreliable and potentially chaotic. It can be completely detrimental to your game plan. Like literally Scarlet Witch can lose you the game, right? And so I love the way they captured the chaotic nature of Scarlet Witch in this card.
We keep saying 2-cost, but maybe this is where they did a lot of their great design. Sentinel is the same in my head, and one that I really enjoyed whenever I first started playing. It's that endless wave. There's always another Sentinel. It's a robot. You know what I mean? Like that's why robots are so commonly used in film, because you can just have endless, and they're not like lives per se, right? So Sentinel is carried well. Scarlet Witch. I remember when I saw Scarlet, I didn't get it, and I didn't really like it. I was like, this is how they used her. But now that we play, I totally, I completely get it now. Why she works, the chaos that embodes behind her. Like when I first started playing, I didn't know why Scarlet Witch had this ability, and it didn't feel as good. And maybe they still could do something a bit different here. But now it makes like way more sense. Do you have any other ones here, bud?
I think the last one I want to close out on is Mr. Negative. Mr. Negative has an amazing synergy between who Mr. Negative is and the effect on the game. Like, it's a -1. He's negative right off the bat. I mean, the card art's fantastic as Mr. Negative. The fact that he flips all the card arts is pretty damn cool. There's so much flavor around Mr. Negative, and it is a complicated card. Like, we joke about this all the time, Cozy. You bring it up, I feel like, once a month. We're like, well, this card, can't come out this way because Mr. Negative exists, right? It has this constant constraint on the design of future cards. It's a huge undertaking. I think this card represents a huge undertaking for Marvel Snap's development team, and I love what it does for the game, even if it's not necessarily a good card.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I feel like we're getting more cards like Mr. Negative. Like Iron Lad is such a tremendously well-made card. Glenn, who designed this, and High Evo, we're getting some cool ones out there. Spider Ham is coming out. That's wacky and wild. And that might make my list of like just a fun design, even though people might hate it. So like cards that just completely, you look at it, you're like, there's no way this is going to work. And like Mr. Negative, I feel like a lot of players would be like, this has got to be the best card when they come in here. Like, this is insane. And then you realize consistency matters, right? And I definitely think this was a pretty solid design. So it's cool, man. It's cool that they've built so much of an identity behind the archetypes and behind styles of play. But then the cards themselves have a lot of style and personality as well.
Now we're going to be talking about the cards that we believe need a buff. Now, these are cards that hopefully are going to get some love in the upcoming OTAs, patch changes, and whatnot. A few of them I feel like a bit of a broken record on because I've been begging. Who do I got to beg to get a couple of these buffs, Cozy? And I'm going to hit you off with one that I think really needs some love. Can I please, once again, just Nick Fury? What do we have to do for Nick Fury? Like, what is it about Nick Fury that we can't get some 5/8 action for Nick Fury? Like, as a 5/7, it's not bad. And I get he has synergy with Devil Dinosaur. He's got synergy here and there. But if we're going to talk about 5/8 being a baseline stat for a 5 cost, why does Nick Fury got to be under that?
I mean, it's funny because we just saw in the data tier list on my side that he was like the bottom 2, right? So it's not even an opinion at this point. It's fact that he's just not a good card. I just don't know what to do to make him much better, though. Like, 5/8, I don't even know if that's enough. If it was, I think they would have tried it, Like, Dazzler is one I'm going to bring up next, right after this. They probably don't do this in OTAs because it's like, in fact, Glenn has said, like, we're not doing Dazzler right now because we want to rework how she works. And so, yeah, it's just inconsistent. And the more 6-cost cards we get, Coulson is 3-cost, 4 power with perfect curve. Nick Fury's 5-cost, 7 power, random-ass 6-cost card. So it's, I don't know, man. I think it kind of speaks to itself. They had to figure it out. I like what he does. I think they just need to make it a little bit more polished. Okay, we'll come to Dazzler in a second, but we're on this, so I might as well stick to it. One card I had on my list, Alex, was Helicarrier. So what about if you discard this, it fills your entire hand with random cards that it can fill, right? So what, you could do a Lady Sif on turn 3. You would have a good amount of hand space left to work. Then there's synergy with discard. You could have some crazy MODOK play, and then MODOK would have, much more use outside of just kind of the pigeon that he's in now. I feel like it would bring a lot more style. Maybe that's too crazy, but they're random. They're random cards, and it would be on, like, amongst the last turns. I feel like that's how you can make this thing very unique. You can make it work with Collector. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
That's interesting. The idea of it playing a Sif on like turn 3, then on turn 4, you essentially stuff your draw. It's like the Triskelion effect, right? Mm-hmm. So a disadvantage is that you don't get to draw through your deck because you stuff your hand, and now you got to start dumping things, right? So you actually reduce the chance you pull your MODOK or whatever it is. Cozy, I think you're onto something. That's pretty fascinating.
It's kind of cool. Yeah. I mean, hey, I'll just say this. Now that Medusa got buffed, everything's on the table.
True.
And listen, do I think they take anything from us here? Probably not. But I will say we've hit it on a lot of changes. We have nailed it, and it's cool to see that. So Helicarrier, I think that's the way you fix that card. Nick Fury, discover the same thing, and we might as well bounce to Dazzler, man. Dazzler will be. I think Dazzler could be tomorrow. I think we could see a new Dazzler tomorrow. What do you do with Dazzler? I don't quite know. Right now, ongoing card, if you have 4 cards at each location, +6. Terrible. Space Throne doesn't... It's just... It's such a bad card. Either, I think, if you have 4 cards at the location, it gets a boost up. Or if you and the opponent have 1 location each, with 4 cards. There's got to be something there that doesn't make it mojo. Dazzler's so cool. I just think that it needs a complete rework on how it's going to happen. Even Glenn has mentioned that. What do you think about Daz?
I don't have an answer for Dazzler. Like, Dazzler is one of those cards that I feel like it looks like on paper it should have potential. But in actuality, in playing Dazzler, you're like, well, this is not going to work out right. And sometimes, like, the cards you have to play to complement Dazzler feel terrible. Like you know, you start a Dazzler deck, you're like, oh, I had Squirrel Girl. Like, why? Like there's just so many decks. Like, it just doesn't feel good. Like, there's nothing about the archetype that you're playing Dazzler in that ever feels right.
Yeah, and you can't make it a 4/6 because they already said they would have done that. Like, if you make it a 4/6 and it gets +4, whatever, then it's like, I don't even know how many times you would even try to get it. I mean, and that could be okay. Then you have a good stack card that can build. Kind of neat. But yeah, they definitely need to figure that out. That's at the top of my list as well. Any other terrible garbage cards?
You know what? I'm going to hit you with one that I feel like even in the Guardians of the Galaxy season felt unplayable, and that was Mantis. Like, Mantis has felt like completely forgotten. It's a card that I feel like people just don't even realize exists half the time. You have these Guardians of the Galaxy effect, you have Nebula on the board, and you know, this Nebula should be like, play here, play here, play here. Mantis isn't anywhere. And it's not that I don't think the effect is cool. Like, it's kind of like a Cable to some degree, but I don't think it's worth it. Like, it's just, when do you ever want to play Mantis besides never?
It goes back to first of all, if she wasn't good with Nebula, her time is sailed. It goes back to what we said. Every card has to have purpose in the deck. And even though the effect is cool and you can throw on Reddit why the card makes sense in this deck, there's always a better option. And one cost, I think we've said this before, but one cost is by far the strictest in that field because there's 3 that shine, right? So much more than other cards. And so each of these need more flavor to the card. Like Quicksilver. Dude, Quicksilver is beyond a meme at this point. Like, this card is dead. It's a dead card, right? So, definitely Mantis. I don't know what you do. And this would be one, in my opinion, that they kind of have to get rid of the whole, like... I think you change the cost. I think you figure it out there, and you start there. We have Rocket. He's already in the 1 cost. You change the cost, you figure out something to do. She can't be a 6 cost as Mantis, but it needs to be something different. And Mantis has very cool ability. She's very, like, she's got a lot going for her as far as lore. They need to change it. And with Mantis, man, the last one I have, and we're going to keep saying it. And I know he said somewhere that they don't want to do this card. But you know what? They also said they weren't going to touch any of the starting cards, and we got Medusa. It's Magic. All I want for Magic, the only thing I want, is if I hide her under Invisible Woman or there's Dark Dimension, I want Limbo to trigger on 6 and matter. It doesn't. It'll do Limbo, and it's like dead. It's done. And if Limbo appears, let us go to 7. You know, you don't have to do anything else crazy. Maybe you can't even play her on turn 6. But if I could sneak her in there, I think it matters. I don't know. Magic definitely needs some help.
That is a really cool interaction. Invisible Woman Magic. I think this is a buff to 2 cards that need buffs. And like Invisible Woman just got buffed. I think that's really interesting. I love that, Cozy. I think that is a really fascinating approach to fixing Magic without making it like completely broken or even changing its cost. That is really interesting.
Because then people can't get rid of it with Storm or whatever. That, you know what I mean? You kind of hide your play and you're committing 2 of your turns to even just get to that turn 7.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that change. I hope that that actually comes to fruition, even just as a test, right? Like, you don't have to make any radical changes, I think, to make that work. Like, you don't have to change the cost of the card, the power of the card. You just make that interaction work, and suddenly you have yourself a very interesting card. And another card that works really well with Invisible Woman, but for a different reason, more of a sneaky approach, is Omega Red. And this is a card that's largely been forgotten. Omega Red is a 4/5, and if it's not being played with Zabu, much like Magic, you say, hey, Mantis isn't being played during the Guardian season, what's the point? Zabu has been one of the best cards in Marvel Snap forever, and still Omega Red feels useless. There have been some attempts to make Omega Red work. I actually had a list out there that I thought worked really well with Omega Red, but ultimately, like, even as a 4/6, like, it needs something. I think it actually just needs a little bit of power. I don't think you change the ability. I think an OTA can fix Omega Red, and I think it has to happen.
They have a lot of numbers they can mess with. They can make it a 4/6. They can make it less than 10 power ahead. They can make it +5 to all other locations, which could match, like Doctor Doom. They can make the power higher and then make the other power higher. There's a lot of numbers. I'm surprised he hasn't been messed with because of that. because he's very unique and cool. And so, yeah, man, I would put that on the list as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of dials here. There's a lot of ways you can play with it. And as we end this episode, we got to say Punisher too. Punisher, what the hell's going on with Punisher? How is Punisher just dodging these buffs? Like, it is by far one of the worst cards in them all. If you're playing Punisher right now, you're either a bot or you are insanely inebriated, and you need to stop playing Marvel Snap. And I want to take a second to say thank you so much for all the amazing commentary you provide, not only on the Snapchat, but in the greater Marvel Snap community as well.
Thanks, buddy, man. I appreciate it. Always fun being here. Always fun doing another episode of Snap. Next one's going to be crazy with Conquest, dude. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll see you on that next Snapchat episode.